the bank.
Hey Brett, how's it going this week?
Good, Ange. How are you?
Good. Well, that means it's another episode of Money in the Bank, the podcast where we talk about all things related to personal finance. And we embarrass Brett by asking him a trivia question every week.
Yeah, 101. There's always time to start over.
Yeah, well, the listeners love it. It's actually everyone's favorite part of the episode, so we can't cut it out now.
Maybe we should rethink our format.
So, for the average first-time home buyer, how long do they stay in their first house?
3 years.
11 and a half years.
Who are these people? I know no one that is staying in their house at least to 10 years. It is unheard of now.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not us. We're really bringing that average down.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the baby boomer generation. Not even. I think Gen X is the one that I'm thinking of that moves around more frequently than not. But my parents' generation, right, which is baby boomer, they have been in their house for a long time. They've moved once in my lifetime. So
even your parents weren't that long in. Well, even their first house though, they weren't that long in it, right? Because they had a brief stint in another state.
Well, I was born there, so 16 years.
That wasn't their first house.
No, it wasn't their first house. They moved
several times. Yeah, I'm saying
the
first house. First house that people buy, they stay in for 11 and a half years.
That's why I got it wrong. No, first house is usually people get in and they're like, oh, this is my forever home, and then I hate it, and then they move out quicker.
Well, I think a lot of people buy a starter home and then they just end up delaying the next purchase, which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's financially pretty smart, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, it's not us, and so we had a podcast, about 6-7 months ago where we talked about moving to Florida, and then now we have one talking about moving back to Chicago. So hopefully
always do as we say, not as we do.
Yes. Hopefully we will be in Chicago for a while now. We knew Orlando wasn't a permanent move. We knew it was a temporary thing. And so now we are back in the Midwest. We're very excited to be here. And we ended up buying a place, even though, as Brett said, do as we say, not as we do, because we were like, yeah, we're going to rent for a while. Here we are. So this podcast, we wanted to actually just kind of walk through our thought process the last couple months in hopes that if somebody else is in a similar boat where maybe you're moving soon or, something along those lines, maybe this will help you. Or furthermore, maybe even if you're not moving soon, it just gives you a glimpse into our madness, which I'm sure will make for an entertaining episode, if nothing else.
That's right, yeah. So we didn't expect to be in the situation we're in now. So, right, we made a lot of different decisions along the way, but, we're really happy with the way it ended up.
Yeah. So, Brett, when we first talked about moving back to Chicago, and we were renting in Orlando, luckily,
mm-hmm.
or intentionally maybe.
Intentionally, for sure.
We were renting there, and we really thought we were going to rent here in Chicago. So we...
Right, and the reason to do that is you get a lay of the land. You're not as familiar with the real estate market in the first place in order to make an accurate buying decision. Right, there's a lot of reasons you want to kind of get the lay of the land. What neighborhood do you want to be a part of, especially in Chicago, because all the neighborhoods are very different and have different, things that you cater to, restaurants and
personalities.
Demographics. Yeah, a lot of personalities. So, right, making sure you're in the right spot and you're not just buying and be like, oh, I wish I was 2 miles away, right? And now you're in a situation where you're trying to get out of your house and then move into another location.
Well, and beyond that, we've talked about the implications of buying, and it's definitely much more of a financial commitment. It can be very expensive. And even the rent versus buy calculators don't always take into account the maintenance costs that you'll have to pay yourself because you own the place, and that trusty landlord, when the toilet breaks, isn't going to come fix it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we've kind of laid all that out, and we were going to look at renting. But an interesting thing, when we decided to move to Chicago, a lot of people would pick a neighborhood and then say, this is how much it costs me to rent the place that I want. And Brett and I, when we move anywhere or when we think about buying any house, we say, this is the monthly payment we want. And then we have to figure out how to get something that fits our needs that stays in our budget.
Right.
which is a really interesting thing to do in Chicago, where rent prices could be as high as you want them to be, really, and definitely can only fall so low. So we actually lived in Chicago about 6 or 7 years ago, and we lived kind of up in the Lakeview area. And we looked at moving back there, and rent prices had gone up about 50% from when we moved. And we were kind of shocked by that, and we were like, we don't want to pay that much money.
Yeah, because, I mean, the prices we were looking, in the price ranges we thought we needed to be in before coming back to the city, every place was just, like, not where we wanted to be. Right? It was pretty bottom of the barrel. You're not going to get a lot for your money. And it was just offensively high prices for those conditions.
Yeah, so then we expanded our search to other neighborhoods, and we were finding that just Chicagoland in general, rent prices had gone up. Now, I will say we have a lovely 60-pound dog that you probably hear clanking around in the background of our episodes occasionally, and that was definitely not helping us any, because by turning that, dogs allowed switch on, I noticed that we weren't able to be as flexible as maybe we could have been without a dog. And then we did have a list of must-haves. So Brett really was pushing to live in a studio, and I was really pushing against that.
Wow, the dog really wanted the bed to be right next to the kitchen so she could see what was going on, and we spent most of the time in the kitchen, so it just made sense.
Yes, but I kind of vetoed that one, so I said at least 1 bedroom, maybe 2, and we came up and we looked at a whole slew of places, and actually the best place we found, the place that we would have moved into had we decided to not buy, was going to be in like the basement of a building that clearly this place had active water damage when we went to look at it.
Right, they had the concrete floor ripped up, and they were laying a new pipe, or replacing a pipe that had, I guess, frozen over the winter, maybe.
Right.
And was leaking into that room. So, and we saw from the way that they were patching it also that they were not doing any kind of like water remediation, and that water had been there for probably months, and
yes.
So definitely was going to have mold issues within the next like 2 months.
Yeah, and that was the best place we found.
That was it was the nicest, layout wise. And best, features, and like the kitchen was really nice, but and the price was pretty good, location was good, but we don't want to really live in that situation.
Yeah, so instead I was like, hey, what happened if we were to buy? And we actually found a unit for sale in the building that Brett used to live in, and it was basically priced the same as when we left the city. And so we were like, wait, we can time travel and get like 2013 prices if we buy, but if we rent, we have to get 2019 prices.
Right.
So that sucks. And maybe we should think about buying. So for the same price, including like property taxes, PITI, all of that good stuff, we were able to buy like a nice 2-bedroom that included a parking spot instead of living in a basement that was flooding with no parking spot. So I think we did well for ourselves. And I think that's why we always encourage you to run the numbers and to think about it and think about like, can I afford a down payment? That's obviously really important. Luckily Brett and I were selling a house in Michigan, so we had a down payment that we could put down on this place. And, we just found our money went a lot further if we were willing to buy. And we also had to have the conversation of how long are we going to stay in this place? Because if we are only going to be here for a couple of years, then we should probably rethink this strategy. And for us, the answer was, we are very happy here. We've lived in Chicago before, and we know we can make this a permanent home for a while. And that's important too, because if you're only going to live somewhere for a year or two, it is probably not a good decision to buy, because with all the closing costs when you buy and sell, that can quickly eat up your equity that you worked so hard to get for that property.
Mm-hmm. So, there's a couple other things to consider as well, though. So we wanted to, we really like the condition of this space. You can target your area a little bit more rather than like having to be at the mercy a little bit of trying to find a good deal. You're trying to find a good deal with a house also, but when the market is just a better situation for buyers or renters, either one, then you have a little bit more power in that situation, right? And so this was a little bit more of a buyer's market for home purchases, condo purchases, whatever, right? Single family homes here in Chicago is a different market completely because those are astronomically more expensive to have like a yard and bigger house and all that stuff in the city. But condo living, right, is a separate market, and because just there's so many of them, right? It kind of has a life of its own again then versus renting. So, we like having the power in those kind of situations, and right, so we get to pinpoint the exact location we wanted to be in within literally one block of where we wanted to be, and there's great things in this neighborhood and the places we were renting at. I mean, we're looking at a 5-6 block span, and you get what you get in that space, right? One of these is going to be the best of those options, but
yeah. So for us, what was really important was to being in a city, living by a grocery store is it's the real win of the century.
Yeah.
Because we walk to get our groceries most of the time. So it's amazing how when you're looking at apartments, you're like, oh, well, this one's only an extra, 5 minutes away than another property. But when it's 0 degrees outside in the middle of winter and you're freezing to death, that 5 minutes makes a big difference. So we made a list actually, and we mapped it on Google. So some of the things on our list were we wanted to be by a grocery store, we wanted to be close to public transportation options, and we wanted to be by a library. And so by kind of mapping those things, we could kind of make little circles on our map and say, yes, this property falls in a range that covers all of those 3 things that are on our must-have list. Or no, this property falls outside that range, and, maybe it's a good property, but it's just not the right one for us.
Right. And then we picked one that didn't fit into that criteria.
I guess it did. So yeah, that was a good way for us to do it. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, so this is the second condo we've owned, but the first one we've lived in. And when you are looking at a condo, whether it's for a rental or living in it, something we definitely wanted to make sure we had a good understanding of before we bought into it was the HOA. We wanted to know what that fee was. We wanted to know what it included. And we wanted to know how well our HOA organization was funded, to make sure, do they have enough money in reserves to kind of cover all of their annual expenses, or are they going to be hitting us with a special assessment here soon? So we definitely reviewed the finances of the HOA as well before we, committed to buying the property.
Right, and usually you can't find that out necessarily until after you've submitted an offer. Because once you submit an offer, they have to provide you with the paperwork from the association that has all that information, right? Like their financials, to see how much money they currently are holding and what were some of the expenses over the last year, like the last year's financial report and stuff like that. So when did they replace the boiler in the building, or utilities, what are normal utility expenses? And so you can get just by looking at that very, very quickly, you can get kind of a good idea of, are these people spending money on the place, or are they just not pocketing it, I guess, because it doesn't go into any person's bank account, but are they not reinvesting in the property itself, so it's not being maintained? And then, right, if you see it isn't being maintained, then probably in the next couple of years, all of a sudden they're going to spike up when they realize, oh no, we need to replace the roof for $50,000, or oh no, we need to replace the boiler for minimum $20,000, right?
Well, and another thing that we've kind of learned by living and owning with an HOA before is it's good to look at how many of the units are owner occupied, because a lot of times if you have more owners, typically people who live there care more about maintaining it well. But another thing to keep in mind is to look at how many people are actually paying their HOA fee, whether it's owner occupied or not. Some people just don't like to pay it. So, kind of on the balance sheet, you can see accounts receivable or accounts uncollected. And essentially that's how many people still owe their dues for the month or year or whatever. And it's important to look at that number because we had a problem with that in our previous association. And so then they would charge a special assessment. They did this one time to build new carports, and we like paid our fee. And it was like 2 years later, they hadn't even started upgrading the carports yet because they were like, well, we haven't gotten all the money. And I was like, well, I already paid for this, and these carports are like literally falling to pieces. So it can be, you want to make sure that you have like a good group of people and the HOA is, well stocked and is hounding people to get their money if they need to.
Right. I mean, I am all about like corporate punishment in that regard, right? Like if you're not paying your dues, this says right in like the association guidelines that you have to follow, that they, you have like this amount of time, and if you don't pay for it, then they can pursue like legal action against you and basically take your property back. Right? It's no different than if you don't pay your taxes, and the government comes and takes your property back. It doesn't matter whether you paid your house off or not, or the bank can come take your house back because they technically own it until you pay off your mortgage, right? So you never really truly own anything, right?
Right.
When it comes to property. So a condo is no different. Like you're at the mercy kind of those HOA dues, and those are there for a reason. They're a good thing to have, right? It's no different than paying taxes or whatever. You get benefits for living in that space, and right, that it's full service. But right, if you're not paying for that stuff, you want the association to like be enforcing that stuff, because if you're the good citizen, right, that plays by the rules, and like another 20% of the building doesn't, and there's no repercussions, then guess who's going to be on the end of that stick, right?
Right.
So you don't want to get into that situation if you don't want to, but you want to have a board that's willing to like enforce those rules at the same time.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think that covered kind of our rent versus buy scenario and for this situation.
That was just the first week we were investigating properties. So next, that was the first 10% of the journey.
Do you have more to add about it?
No, I mean
moving on
from the whole roadmap here. Yeah.
Oh, right. So then we decided, we're buying this place, but our closing date was going to be maybe like the 8th of June, we'll say. It was somewhere around there. But we needed to be out of our place. Well, we had a decision to make. We could stay in Orlando through the end of May and have kind of a week gap to fill. Or we could stay through the end of June, but then we had to pay a whole additional month of rent.
Right.
And so when we were looking at this, we started the discussion of, should we just hire movers instead of doing it ourselves? So we mentioned our last move when we went from Michigan to Orlando. It cost us between $1,500 and $2,000 to make that move, and we did it ourselves. My dad helped us out, drove the truck, but otherwise we did it ourselves. We didn't hire, I guess, anybody else to do it. Yeah. And so this time we got a quote from a professional, and it was essentially the same as taking that same money that we paid the first time plus 1 month of rent. So we were like, for the same price or even just a little bit less, we can be out of here. We can get our security deposit back. We don't have to pay on 2 places and just kind of be done with it. So we opted to do that, and one of the benefits from hiring movers is they stored our stuff for that additional 10 days that we were essentially kind of homeless, I guess.
Right, yeah, we didn't have any stuff. We didn't, it was all loaded into somebody else's truck somewhere, moving across the country. We didn't have anywhere to live, so yeah, we were staying out of a hotel. Luckily, I was at work, still traveling for work, so we got the hotel for free, so that was another factor that went into our decision there was like, when you're doing this, where are you going to go? If you're going to pay for a hotel for 3 weeks, then maybe it's not worth it, right?
Right.
But we were able to stay on my company's expense, not on our own.
During the week, and then on weekends, we were like, this is a great time to visit friends.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so we crashed on some couches for 2 weekends, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Which was, it worked out well for us. And, it was also just kind of nice because that way it was done and we weren't like, because another factor we had to consider was we needed to be physically up here for the closing. So if we still had the place in Orlando, it would have been a little bit more back and forth for us, whether that was flights or cars or whatever, which would have been an additional expense as well. Mm-hmm. So for us, it just made a lot more sense to be up here. The nice thing about being in the Midwest is we did know quite a few people that even if Brett's company wouldn't have paid for the hotel, we actually have friends in the area that offered, their couches or guest rooms to us, which was very nice. And, it's really, we would have been able to make it work either way. And it was kind of nice because we also just didn't have the hassle of like driving a big truck up and then getting it into the city. And that would have been terrifying.
Yeah. For people that are not used to that, yeah, driving in Chicago's traffic is not great if you're in any of the rush hour scenarios, which is not like, anytime after like 9 p.m. it's fine. But from like 6 a.m. until like 7 p.m. it's terrible. Doing that with like a big moving truck, when I don't think those are allowed to drive like on Lakeshore Drive either, which is like the easiest way to get up and down throughout the city
right
quickly.
Yeah.
So you'd have to take all the city streets, which even more fun.
Michigan Avenue, baby.
Right? Shopping Central.
Yeah, so we were kind of happy with our decision, but also when you hire movers, ask a lot of questions and pack really, really well, I think is the lessons I learned.
Yeah, so I mean you can opt for the service that they offer to pack your stuff, which I'm sure, we didn't even consider that. I'm sure that is like exorbitantly more expensive.
Right, we did like the cheap bare bones.
Right, we just had them like, all of our stuff was packed up in boxes, or like some stuff that doesn't fit in boxes, they just kind of like, it's like loose items. They just kind of like throw those into a big giant bin, and then they just transport the bin, which is a good way to do it because they have that stuff. But professional movers, I would say, are regular movers that don't care about your stuff and are just trying to move it as fast and as economically for them as possible, just with better marketing.
Yes.
And their marketing includes, don't use any of the smaller people because, they're unreliable. But, from using one of the, we use probably, there's probably 3 big names, I guess. We use one of those big 3 names in moving. It was the first one that I thought of from being marketed to forever for large moving companies. And that's the one we ended up going with. And like, I think somebody that I would have found on Craigslist probably could have taken better care of our stuff.
So we used to watch Shipping Wars. And if anybody watched Shipping Wars, there was this guy on there, Jarrett. And he kind of like didn't always do a great job. I would have trusted him far more to do a better job than the company we hired.
Right. Because when we got our stuff back and delivered finally, and they showed up, they gave us a 3-week window in which they could have shown up in, right? Which to me seems pretty ridiculous. Even for a cross-country move, to not be able to dial in the target a little bit more than that, right? Because obviously that's like not going to work for us because like we have the closing date and like it needs to be in a certain window, and like we can't just like not have our stuff for like a month.
And being in a city in a high rise, we have to rent the elevator, we have to reserve it.
The coordination of the elevator, we have to talk to other people, we have to get the insurance from the moving company and schedule that, and they have to show up in a certain time window too, not only on a certain day. So we have to like schedule that a week in advance. Like we need to know like a lot of information. Luckily the building we moved into is like pretty flexible about that because I had worked with this management company before somewhere else, so we got pretty lucky, and I knew that they were pretty forgiving. But I'm sure this happens all the time too, where people just like are at the mercy of like people that have their stuff and whatever. So they all kind of have to make it work together. But when we ended up getting our stuff, right? They finally delivered it. They were 2 hours late from when I told them we had scheduled the elevator, and we only had it for 3 hours. And I think it's whatever, 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes that
was $50.
Was like $50 extra to like rent the elevator. And luckily nobody else had we did it in the morning and nobody else had rented in the afternoon. So we got away with it a little bit, but it was just very unprofessional for that. The stuff that they delivered was our boxes fell over. It looked like every single one of the boxes that we had packed, cardboard boxes that we got at like Home Depot or whatever. Look, they had punctures in them. They had like torn sides. The cardboard was shredded on the outside. It just looked like the whole truck just like stopped suddenly and a huge stack of boxes just went tumbling through the vehicle.
Well, my personal favorite was we packed a bunch of stuff in like Rubbermaid tubs. Rubbermaid tubs that we have used to move from Chicago to Michigan, around in Michigan in different houses, Michigan to Orlando. So these boxes have held up
10,
every
10
move.
years, I think we've had this.
And so we pack them just like we always do. And several lids were broken in half. And we were like, hey, what happened? And the guy was like, well, those aren't moving containers. They are storage containers. They're not meant to be stacked like this. And I was like, literally every single person in the world stacks Rubbermaid tubs on top of each other.
That's, as far as I know, that's their like core design feature. It's like the ability to stack them with heavy crap inside. So
yeah,
they were all caved in. Yeah, it was crazy.
Make a long story short, we had a lot of stuff damaged. And then the cherry on the cake was like, everything is damaged. We're frustrated. And we're like, what is this box in the corner? And they like promise you that your stuff is like sectioned off so nothing commingles. And I'm like, I didn't really have that color tape. So I go to open it and there's this like scary voodoo towel right on top of the box. And it is like totally not our stuff. And it took them like another 2 weeks to come and get this box from us.
2 weeks that I was like hounding them. I sent four emails in the first week before I was like, here's the tracking number of the box. There's got a sticker on it. Great. Here's the color sticker and the number. And like, you should be able to easily figure out who it belongs to because you know where it came from. And this was like 2 days ago. And nope. The person they asked me 4 different times for that information. They weren't even passing along on their end. Like the worst process known to man, and I had to keep hounding them to get it done.
Yeah. So long story short, it was it was a little bit more cost effective for us to do it this way, but it ended up being just as frustrating as moving ourselves.
Just in a different way.
But I will say, because we've kind of talked about all the negative, the 2 guys who moved us in that were like from Chicago, they were fantastic. They were quick. They worked really hard. They hauled all this stuff. I'm just calling him out. Like the guy from Florida, he was just like arguing with us. He was rude. He was super unprofessional. And he was like pretty lazy. Mm-hmm. So I just want to throw that out because I've worked with people in Chicago before when I lived here to help move me in. And I feel like Chicago movers, you're a whole awesome class of your own and you like get shit done. So thank you, because that was like the only thing that made me not want to rip my hair out completely on moving day. It was like how professional the other 2 guys were.
Right.
So.
They said they could handle anything, and the other, the Florida guy told me at 4 different points that he was going to have to call somebody to like come back at a later time to like do something that he was not able to do.
He was going to take our front door off of our condo and leave it off for 2 weeks.
He didn't. Well, he was going to have somebody else come to take it off because he didn't want to take it off.
Right, and then he was going to leave it off for 2 weeks.
He wasn't going to put it back on, yeah. Okay.
So, who needs a front door? Anyways, so just a caveat there. If you hire a moving company, ask them a lot of questions. And
read reviews, I think.
Read reviews.
I mean, we asked some questions, but, we didn't go deep into the reviews because we were like, oh, this is a big name company. They do this all the time. Like, we're in like the upper tier of like this process, right? So all the, kinks have kind of been worked out and, no different than, picking like Joe regular mover and like, I mean, they didn't steal our stuff, I suppose, but
yeah.
Luckily we didn't lose any boxes like that other poor family that we ended up with their stuff.
That's true. Okay, so then once all of our stuff was delivered, it's like, what do you do now, right? We just have all this shit everywhere. And what we've always done every time we move is we unpack our kitchen first because that at least allows us to get a fully functioning kitchen, which allows us to start cooking at home again, which is always really welcomed after like a few weeks with no kitchen and no cooking supplies.
Mm-hmm. And for most people, probably the last thing that they want to do is like unpack boxes for like 6 hours and then start making dinner. But I mean, we're just those kind of people, right?
Yeah.
It's way easier to get a pizza, but especially in Chicago, just like walk out, go out to dinner or have somebody deliver food real quick. But we just walked over to the grocery store, checked that place out, found some good deals, and
we actually got a CSA, so we had a CSA picked up. We already had some vegetables in the house, and we were ready to eat some delicious salad.
Another reason we needed to coordinate our move-in date, we needed to start this CSA. This is absolutely essential. We
ended up getting the CSA on move-in day, or on the day we bought the condo, but we didn't move in for 2 days later. So by that point, when my kitchen stuff got here, I was ready to start using it.
Right. And CSA, for new listeners, is a community-supported agriculture. It's a farm share that you can set up a kind of an annual or not annual membership, but like semi-annual membership where you get vegetables and fruits and whatever you agree to for like 6 months or something like that, and you just pay up front.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it helps the farmers because you pay up front. So then when they're buying all their seeds and everything, they have their costs covered. And then instead of, getting any money back, they return your money by giving you the produce once it starts growing. So it's a really cool program. It really helps farmers out. And we've done this for about 5 years now. We've done several different ones, and we have always been very happy with our experience. So
yeah, it's always been a pretty good value as well.
Yeah.
From a cost perspective and quality of food and just all around good deal.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about on this moving episode is we kind of started getting settled, and mind you, we went from basically in Michigan we had a 4-bedroom house that we went down to a 2-bedroom apartment in Orlando, and then we stayed in a 2-bedroom condo in Chicago, but it got a little bit smaller. And the funny thing about all of that is we still have to buy some stuff, which just seems like ridiculous.
Right. After we've gotten rid of so much stuff, right?
Right.
Every time we transition, we just it feels like we just unload half of our place.
Yeah. But what's interesting by moving into different spaces, like now that we're in a smaller space, we're in about an 850 square foot place, we just need different items because now we really just need storage solutions.
Right. So yeah, even after we've gotten rid of so much stuff, just the way that things are laid out, like maybe you don't have as many closets as you did before, or maybe you have more closets than you did before, but less, like more open space, right? So, maybe it makes sense that you get some like closet organizers or like storage bins or, right? Because if you're in a 4-bedroom house with a basement, usually like there's a part of that basement or a large part of that basement that is like sectioned off, and you can put like Rubbermaid tubs up on like shelves and because they're meant to be stacked, I think, just not in a moving truck. Big difference there.
No, don't stack them. Make sure you have shelves between each one.
Right. And right, so that's one way to store a lot of stuff, but like we don't have that square footage anymore for like having like a giant room dedicated to storage bins. So now we're moving things out of the storage bins and more into like storage, grids kind of in our like closet section here. So
yeah,
just different solutions, transitioning things from one place to the next just to make things easy to access, and I'm not digging through stuff all the time from a huge stack of boxes that are stored in some room in the corner. Storage like under the counters. For like our bathroom sink got it's like instead of like a 2-sink vanity, it's like a 1-sink vanity, right? So we had a lot more space in there before, and so now we need the like like a shelf inside of our like cupboard and stuff, just like simple stuff like that. Pan solutions in the kitchen because the layout of our cupboards is different, and now we have like a Lazy Susan versus like we have way more cupboards now, I think, than we did in the last place. But we lost a pantry, so now, right, we're just transitioning that as well. So just kind of weird scenarios like that.
Yeah, so it's a lot of little stuff, odds and ends, but instead of running out and buying kind of everything that we could need, we're making a priority list, and we're just saying, like, here's the things that we really need, like getting, that pan organizer. It's just kind of like 3 metal prongs, but you can slide pans in, and it just helps keep the cupboards cleaner. I mean, that's literally like a $5 thing, and it'll make our life so much better. So that's like pretty high on our list. And then, other things like, my espresso maker, because it broke years ago and we just never really replaced it. I guess that's pretty low on the list, which is sad, but fair. So, it's just good. We really did. We moved in, we evaluated everything. We didn't run out and buy literally anything except felt. I guess that was like our number one priority, was because we have hardwood everywhere. So we bought a yard of felt at like Michael's, the fabric store. And then I hot glued it onto all of our chairs and tables and everything that has little legs so nothing gets scratched.
Right, because you can go buy like the little like moving pads or whatever. Even the cheap ones at Home Depot are like at least like $3 or $5, and I don't know, we got that like huge amount of felt for like nothing, right?
Yeah, it was like $4 or something.
Right, and then so you just cut it and like glue it, or you could use like Elmer's,
Yeah, I have a hot glue gun with like way too many sticks, so that part was like free for us.
Yeah, just any kind of adhesive, and then you're good to go, right?
Yeah. And it helps, it just saves your floors. So that was something that we did right away. But outside of that, we just made like this really big list of everything we could think of that we wanted for the space, and even things that maybe we don't want right away, but in the future. And then it kind of helps us to look at big picture. What do we want to get now versus later? I think a lot of people, they buy a place and then it's like, I want everything right now. And they end up racking it up on credit cards.
Right. And it's really funny because one of the things when we prioritized that list, I think the first thing that I ended up ordering was a gallon of like Frank's hot sauce.
Well, yeah, of course. Priority numero uno.
Right? Yeah. After you had all that hot chicken and before we left to eat all the things out of our freezer.
Well, clearly, since we unpacked the kitchen first, we were ready to use the Franks.
Right.
So
yeah, we had our eggs and chicken and all kinds of stuff ready to go. Just needed some condiments.
So yeah, but we make this big list, and then instead of putting anything on credit cards, we just kind of wait until we can afford it, as we go. And there's no rush, right? So going back to the stat I said at the beginning of the podcast, the average first-time homebuyer lives in their house for 11 years, and I actually found out that the average regular homebuyer stays in their house for almost 14 years, so even 3 more years. If you just bought your place, you're kind of going to be there for a long time. So, just settle in, get situated, and you have plenty of time to make these purchases and to make the house your own. It doesn't have to happen overnight.
Right. Nothing needs to be perfect like in the first 5 seconds you're there. Because everybody, I feel like it's a mad race to get everything show ready, make your house look like it was HGTV staged, and like start having like dinner parties as fast as possible, right? Because you're in a new space, you want to have people over because it's exciting times, right? But people just understand that like when you move into a new place, it's chaos for like 6 months.
Right.
And until like, things will settle out and you'll get things put away and you'll put it in one spot and then you'll hate it there and you'll reorganize stuff again. And, that's just kind of the way it is. So
yeah, what's really great for us is it's summer in Chicago and our building has a rooftop. So when we have people over, we can just show them up there and they don't even have to come in our condo yet. So we have until winter to get it up to snuff.
Right, there's an ice cream parlor like down the street, and a rooftop deck with grills and like lounge chairs and all kinds of nice stuff. So who needs to be in our apartment anyway when it's nice and you're in the city? And we're like 2 blocks from like Lake Michigan too, so we can go out there and we can watch fireworks and hang out on a nice day. So
yeah, so we can just really kind of force people to enjoy our neighborhood, and then in the winter when our house is ready, then we'll be like, yeah, come over for dinner.
Right. Yeah, because we picked this neighborhood because the neighborhood's awesome, not because the apartment we got here was like the nicest place we could have possibly lived, because it's not a 4-bedroom house in Michigan, right? So right. That was a nicer place that we could have lived in. I mean, this is a very nice space. It's just a lot smaller because we want to spend more of our time outside of the apartment.
Right. And especially people from the Midwest can feel my pain. Like, we only get 4 months of summer if we're lucky, so we gotta enjoy it because we're gonna be inside with winter for 8 months of the year.
Right, but then you really enjoy it when it's nice.
You do. I say nobody enjoys summer like people from the Midwest.
Right, everybody in LA is just like, our weather is so consistently nice all the time. Oh, what a downer. Right.
It moves like 2 degrees there, and they're like, oh my god, it's so hot today, and oh my god, it was so cold yesterday. I'm like, yeah, let me tell you about cold.
Sorry, stereotypical people from LA listening. So we just had to poke fun at you a little bit.
Yeah, because we're just jealous, but it's okay. So, well, anyways, Brett, do you have anything else to add about our move or any kind of remaining tips you want to leave people with?
I'd say even if you buy in a new space, just expect there to be, kind of weird things here and there. If it's a new apartment, even if you got an inspection, whatever it was, there's probably going to be stuff that slipped through the cracks and you'll need to fix up at some point. In our case, there was like a leaky faucet and like the drain was backed up a little bit. So a couple little plumbing things that we moved in here, but not a big deal, in the side square footage. There could have been a lot of other issues. There could have been like noisy neighbors and like, all kinds of weird problems, but I'd say we were pretty lucky in that regard. But don't be surprised that there's weird things that pop up.
And just to piggyback on what Brett said, even if you buy like So a lot of people think, well, if I just buy a newer place, I won't have problems. And so they want to buy a new build or a house built within the last 10 years. And we actually have also done that. You know, we've moved a lot, so we've learned a lot. And I guess I just also want to say, like, even if you buy a brand new place, so Brett said, you know, there's always something that remains true. Even if you buy a brand new place that maybe you even built yourself, there's going to be something that once you start living there, you're like, wait, why did we do this? Whether it's layout wise or color selection or whatever, you're always going to kind of grow with a house. And I guess the key to staying somewhere for 11 to 13 years is to realize, don't be afraid to like slowly save up and fix things and make it your own.
Right. And after, you know, living in a variety of aged buildings, right? So we had a new house in less than 10 years old. We had a new condo that we were living in Florida that we were renting out of, less than 10 years old. We had an older house from, what was it, the 80s?
Yep, the 80s.
Late 70s, something like that. And then this place, I think, is like 67.
56.
50, oh, even older. And I would put all my money on the older places out of that variety we've lived in. The condo in Florida, while it was newer, it had paper thin walls. It had the worst drywall on the interior. We couldn't even hang stuff on the wall without the wall starting to
have studs.
Bow out. It didn't have studs in it. It had like, it was all like aluminum framing or whatever, just to like barely hold stuff together. There was no structural support there for anything that we were trying to put up.
The whole floor was crooked.
Yeah, every surface in that place was crooked for being, you know, a new build. And, you know, I expect that of older places too. Nothing's ever like square, right?
Right.
There's never any like actual like 90-degree corners. But you know, it was bad.
It was really bad.
Like from one end of the room to the other, you could like see a gradual slope.
Yeah.
In the living room.
And then there was like a speed bump in our living room.
And the paper thin wall, so the neighbors playing music and stuff. Like it was
or
like
even talking.
It was like in the living room. Yeah, you could hear them like talking all night long. You know, very clearly. It wasn't coming through the vents. It was like coming through the wall.
Yeah.
And right here in this building from the 50s, everything's like 5 feet of cement in between everything on the floor surfaces. I never have heard a neighbor yet in here that wasn't coming from like the hallway door.
Yeah, and we have
people in the hallway.
babies on both sides of us, and we never hear them crying.
Never hear the babies, never hear the dogs, never hear, right?
Yeah.
Like find yourself a place like that. Like
right.
Not being able to hear your neighbors in a community living environment is worth everything.
But even homes, kind of to Brett's point, you know, we have a duplex that was built in the 70s. And the house we had built in the 80s, like those were really solidly built versus the house that we had that was like tossed up in the last 10 years.
Right, that didn't have any insulation in the master bedroom in Michigan in the winter. It was great.
Yeah, fun times. So, all right, well, we kind of beat this topic to death as we love to do. So thanks for tuning in this week. Thank you so much to everyone, again, who entered our 100 episode contest. We are so excited that we're on episode 101 and it's kind of like a fresh, clean slate. So we plan to do 100 more episodes, and if you're lucky, we're definitely going to be back to our regular Monday schedule. And then if you're really lucky and if our time schedules allow it, we might start adding in some way normal Wednesdays again.
Ooh, those are my favorite because I don't have any. Oh, there's still trivia questions in those too, aren't there?
Maybe you could start giving me trivia questions on Wednesdays.
It doesn't make it any less work.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in this week. And feel free to email me if you have any questions or comments. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Money in the Bank. Make sure to subscribe to us on the iTunes or Stitcher app so that you get weekly alerts every time we post a podcast. Or if you want, you can visit my website, moneyinthebankpodcast.com. And if you want to reach out with any questions or further comments, please email me at Angie@moneyinthebankpodcast.com. I look forward to hearing from you.
Money in the bank.